Bara Indonesia di tahun 2023 mencapai 775 juta ton, jauh dari target Kementerian SDM yang hanya 694,5 juta ton. Tidak hanya menguasai pasar dalam negeri, tapi batubara Indonesia juga menjadi raja di dunia internasional. Tercatat 50% pasokan batubara dunia berasal dari bumi pertiwi. Namun di tengah capaian gemilang produksi batu bara di tanah air, ada beberapa tantangan yang harus dihadapi. Yang pertama adalah volatilitas harga batu bara global, dan yang kedua adalah pelemahan permintaan dari negara-negara yang masih berusaha pulih dari COVID-19. Lalu seperti apa Bumi Resources Tbk atau emiten yang berkode saham Bumi menghadapi tantangan ini? Anda menyaksikan Mining Zone bersama saya, Anneke Wijaya. Seperti apa perusahaan batubara memandang volatilitas harga batubara di 2024? Kita akan langsung tanyakan kepada Direktur Bumi Resources, Dileep Srivastava, yang sudah bersama saya di sini. Mr. Dileep, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dileep, the price of coal was very volatile during 2023. What is your evaluation to the last year? Did you reach the target?
Well, we know what the reasons were for the drop in price. 2022 was a very unusual year. It's very unlikely it will get repeated again. It was an aberration. The coal price went up to 400, which was a record. There was a correction in 2023, and that's for 2 or 3 reasons. One is that the supply became more balanced. Supply in 2022 was strained because of the La Nina conditions, where availability was constrained. We've had a correction in demand, which rose in 2023. And if we are looking at 2023, I would think that the market for coal seaborne grew by about 6 or 7% that year. This year, it is slated to grow, but we would put it at about 2 or 3%. When you talk about prices, I think let's go back to 2016. The coal price was $48 per ton. The price today is still at $120, $130 per ton. And the forecasts for 2024 at this point of time are that they will remain at a level of $120 to $130 per ton. But while this may happen and continue until the middle of this year, we think that it will depend upon weather conditions, it will depend upon supply and demand conditions, it will depend upon sector conditions at that point of time. So there is every chance that as winter approaches and as monsoons approach in the second half, there could be a shrinkage in supply and there could be a demand for coal, and that can hike up the price again.
So what is the biggest challenge for this year? Is it mostly from the internal or from the external?
I think our biggest challenge basically is we think we have to increase volume. So if the coal price is being affected, we have to make up through volume. And when we make up through volume, we have to make sure that we produce a mix which the market wants and we don't keep unwanted inventory. So we have to sell everything we produce. So the idea is to keep your working capital as efficient as possible. The second challenge that we face in 2024 is the challenge of margins. 2022, we had a bumper profit here. 2023, there's a shrinkage, and I think it's across the board in the sector. 2024, our thinking is that it will be a far better year than 2023. So when we look at challenges, I think the challenge would be volume. And the challenge would be to keep a track on what's happening in China and India. China is producing more, India is producing more of domestic coal, but the demand is also rising. So we have to be very, very deeply looking at developments there. And Asia is a natural market. We have a freight advantage, and we've had experience in dealing with these markets for the last 30 years. So we will intensify our involvement in these markets to see that we have enough orders to be able to meet our volume guideline of 80 to 82 million tons this year. This compares with 78 million tons of last year in 23 and 70 million tons in 2022. So we've had an 11% increase in volume in 23, and we expect to have another 3–4% increase in 2024. Hopefully, at this point of time, with the Chinese New Year and with the developments in Indonesia on election prospects, etc., which are around the corner, there is some impact on demand. But we are seeing Q4 last year as buoyant. We are seeing Q1 as normal. And we are hoping that from Q2 onwards, the demand can pick up. So we would be relatively optimistic about prospects in 2024. And let's not forget that Indonesia is a coal-rich country. Its energy transition plan is up to 2060. And gradual steps need to be taken to get there, because we need cleaner energy. And Bumi is already working on a decarbonization strategy, which it is implementing. And we are looking at coal downstream projects as another outlet for coal, which will increase demand. And we are also looking at non-coal diversification projects. At the right time, when we are ready, we will make the announcements for them. But overall, we see prospects as bright and optimistic. We need strong partners. We need strong technology partners. And we need to identify, and we will announce winning projects which can be good for shareholders.
How do you see the election could affect the demand of the coal?
Well, we welcome elections. I think this is something that every country goes through. And we are confident that whomsoever, whatever is the outcome of the election, we sincerely hope and are confident that they will recognize the sector as an earning sector for the country. We are one of the largest national contributors for royalty and for taxes and for levies. We pay 40% of our revenue to the government by way of various levies, taxes, and royalties. And we hope our preeminent status can continue. But in order for us to invest in the future, that is into downstreams and into non-coal diversification projects, we definitely need to make sure that our coal business is profitable and is giving us margin and cash. So while Indonesia pays the highest royalty on coal in the world, at least for us, that is for our UPKs, we think that there could be scope for the authorities to look more kindly at the sector and permit it to actually have enough resource so that they can fund and invest into the newer areas which are essential for the country.
Okay, when you say kindly, does it mean tax reduction from the new government?
Well, we are really talking about a level playing field. I mean, coal is paying a majority of the royalty of all the mineral and metal sectors in the country. And out of that, Bumi is the major one. So we are hoping that there can be a leveling across the sector and a leveling across the resource sector itself. And here we are looking at, if we are looking at royalty, I think Indonesia definitely pays the highest royalty on coal for IUPKs in the world. And there are cases where the royalty treatment is different, for different categories of license holders. So we think there could be some scope, for rationalization and for leveling the playing field, so we can build our own future together.
But the world is going to the sustainable energy, including our government. What is your perspective to it?
Well, I think it's a very welcome move. The whole world is going in the direction of sustainability. When it comes to developing countries such as ourselves, and even if we look at China, we look at India, all of them are doing a dual-pronged strategy. The first strategy is that they are investing in renewable capacity. And the second is that they're also investing in safety and security of energy. And the safety and security of energy is related more to the fact that if you place reliance only on one feedstock, if something happens in delivery of power from that feedstock, then you need a fallback, for the other one. And coal has been proven to be one of the most reliable feedstock to generate power. And Indonesia does produce 65% or 70% of its power using coal. So we think that the policy of Indonesia to transition fully, hopefully by 2060, is a wise one. India's talked about 2050. But until that period of time, there is a definite need for both the sectors and all the feedstocks to coexist together. So it would be impractical, in my opinion, to actually try and move out of fossil fuels overnight, because that would be very damaging, because it could lead to a very risky situation where we may have shortages of power. Renewables, as you know, are difficult to store at this point of time. And on a cost basis, if we do a cost comparison, if you take all composite comprehensive costs, they could even be more expensive, than far cheaper and more easily transportable fossil fuels. So we just need to be pragmatic, on the approach, and I think the country is doing well. Just to give you an example on China, I mean, China is investing in coal-fired power plants. They are investing in increasing production of coal. But at the same time, they are matching it with production in renewables. Now, one can say, what is the objective behind this dual scheme or dual thinking? The objective basically is, why have 100% reliance on just one feedstock? If, for any unforeseen reason, one feedstock is unable to perform, and that's quite likely because renewables have a higher risk factor, then the fallback has to be there, where you are protected for 100% of your power output, and your industrial growth is not affected. And I think, even though India may not be saying it very openly, I think they're also following a similar model. So if China and India are perceived to be doing that kind of model, Indonesia has an ample amount of coal. The perception is that the coal is not very clean, and it leads to emission issues and carbon capture issues. That leads us on to the other factor which can assist. How do you burn coal cleaner? How do you capture the emissions? Now, over the years, there's a lot of attention that has been drawn to it. It was forgotten in 2010 to 20. I think COP28 have again begun this process of introducing carbon capture, utilization, and storage as essential for oil and gas and the fossil fuel industry. I think in Indonesia, there's a regulation as well. And I understand that government authorities will be controlling the process of how to handle the details of the process. And I have personally been advocating for the last 2-3 years that what we need is more investments in research and development, in developing carbon capture, utilization, and storage at a cheaper cost to make it more affordable for developing countries like ours. And if we are able to even spend, let's say, 1% of what we spend on renewable development, on R&D for CCUS and ways to burn coal cleaner and cheaper, I think that would be very useful for the sector. Now, Bumi has 3 captive coal-fired power plants with a capacity of 60 megawatts. We ourselves are looking at technology where we can put in a CCUS system to capture the carbon cheaper. And those are the kind of things that we feel that we should also be looking at. It's not just putting in the technology, because people will always say, oh, it is very expensive. But it is expensive because no money has gone into R&D to make the technology cheaper. In the world, about $6 trillion have been spent on developing renewables. even if 1% of that 6 trillion is spent on R&D in producing CCUS technology systems which are cheaper, I think it could benefit the entire fossil fuel sector.